Health is more important than anything else, no matter how many important things you are dealing with. The moment that you have health problems, everything changes. Every human being puts its survival first. Sometimes the health problems of top officials and heads of state can change the future of nations. The news coming out of Russia today shows that there are some very interesting developments in this regard. One of Putin's biggest supporters, is suffering from very serious health problems. Kari's health problems could change the course of this war. Let's start, if you're ready. There are a few people who are very important roles in the war between Russia and Ukraine. Kari, the leader of Chechen, is one of them. But why is Kari so important? Let's answer this question. As you know, one of Putin's most politically difficult periods was during the Chechnya-Russia War. Russia was very repressive against Chechen culture and religious values. Chechens rebelled against this and started to fight against Putin's rule. Thousands of soldiers in the Russian army died in the war that lasted for years. Chechen soldiers have managed to inflict enormous damage on the Russian army by fighting with guerrilla. The successful operations of Chechen fighters became the talk of the world. Chechen fighters were recognized as among the bravest fighters in the world. The Chechen resistance was supported by citizens in many countries around the world. When Putin realized that he could not win this war, he tried to create a fight among the Chechens. Putin secretly made a deal with one of the Chechen fighters and tried to get other Chechen commanders to leave the country. In the process, he constantly held Kari. Soon Kari suppressed the other Chechen fighters and became the leader of the Chechens, thus officially ending the war between Chechens and Russia. But Chechen fighters did not accept this, and many of them went to Ukraine and other countries to continue their work against Putin. Kadyrov, on the other hand, further developed his relationship with Putin. In the process, Kadyrov became Putin's biggest supporter. Supporting Putin, Kadyrov has amassed a huge personal fortune. Kadyrov also supported Putin's decision to invade Ukraine. Chechen soldiers were sent to the war zone to fight against Ukraine, but in the process there were constant tensions within the army. They were constant between Chechen soldiers and Russian commanders. There were many fights within the army because Chechen soldiers did not follow the orders of Russian commanders. As a result of these fights, there were also problems in the plin relations between Putin and Kiev have hardened. It was also plain that there were disagreements between the two leaders. There were dozens of reports that Kadyrov and Putin were fighting, but none of these reports could be confirmed. But everyone knew that the two leaders were no longer getting along well. The disagreements between the two leaders grew after many Chechen soldiers from the war zone joined the Ukrainian army. This situation started to scare Kadyrov because Kadyrov knew Putin very well. It was claimed that Putin assassinated many Chechen commanders who rebelled against him. Moreover, allegations that some Chechen commanders were poisoned to death were talked about for a long time. Moreover, the allegations that Putin poisoned Russian oppositionist Alexei Navalny are known all over the world. Nav did not want to be treated by Russian doctors after he was poisoned because he thought the doctors would kill. That's why he migrated to Europe. Chechen leader Kav is experiencing a similar fear according to Russian media and reports. Kav has been suffering from kidney disease for a long time. Kav has many problems due to inflammation in his kidneys. This problem also affects Rob's appearance. Water accumulates in Karav's body. Experts analyzing Karav's images immediately diagnose this. Kav refuses to be treated despite his long-standing kidney disease because Kav is afraid of being poisoned in Russian hospitals. Because of this fear, Karav's condition is getting worse every day. Kav now has difficulty even standing up. He has not appeared in front of the cameras for a long time. It is also known that Kyra is having difficulty managing the war because of this illness. Kyra has not even been able to meet with commanders for a long time due to his health problems. This process is putting Kadyrov's political career in difficulty. No one listens to Kadyrov anymore. Kadyrov cannot go abroad to get rid of his health problems because it is thought that Kadyrov will be arrested in many countries. Kadyrov has committed many war crimes because of these crimes. He cannot get treatment now. The health system in Chechnya is very weak. Chechen leader Kadyrov cannot be treated in his own country. Kadyrov had decided to bring doctors from abroad to treat him, so he contacted doctors in the United Arab Emirates. He started working to bring a group of Arab doctors to Chechnya. Ka decided to spend all of his fortune for this. If Kady cannot overcome his health problems, he may have to leave office. This could also change the politics of Chechnya. Many politicians in Chechnya do not want to cooperate with Putin. Chechen politicians may start a new rebellion against Putin. This revolt will first start among Chechen soldiers. The departure of Chechen soldiers from the Russian army could completely change the course of this war. Chechen soldiers play a very important role in the Russian army. The withdrawal of these soldiers from the battlefield could completely change the course of the war. Putin is very afraid of this, but Chechen soldiers are already talking about it. If Kadyrov resigns, Chechen soldiers will lead the war zone. Putin is once again backed into a corner. The Russian army has suffered heavy losses since the beginning of the war, and many Russian soldiers have surrendered. That's why Putin needs more soldiers to fight. But he is also afraid to order a new mobilization because the Russian people march start a huge revolt against this decision. Putin needs Chechen soldiers to continue this war, but the tensions between him and Kadyrov and Kadyrov's health problems make this process more complicated. Putin is completely helpless. If Kadyrov's health problems are not solved, the Ukrainian army will win this war very easily. Everyone is curious about the treatment program of the doctors from the United Arab Emirates if this treatment is not completed in a very short time. Next news. During times of crisis, many people are capable of making extraordinary choices and acting with a great deal of bravery. This is also true. During times of war, Putin was completely incapable of predicting the actions taken by the Ukrainian people. This resulted in a complete rethinking of his strategy for the war. In their statements, the commanders of the Ukrainian army provided very special information that they had gathered from the conflict. The expansion of independent journalism is absolutely necessary in order to bring an end to the rule of authoritarian leaders all over the world. You can show your support for us by clicking the Super Thanks button that's located below the video. The Ukrainian people ruined Putin's. Before carrying out his plan to invade Ukraine, Vladimir Putin examined all of the information at his disposal. This information suggests that the Russian army was considerably larger than the Ukrainian army at the time. Putin was confident that he could easily win the war. However, Putin's plans were foiled by the people of one of the most well-known former commanders of the Ukrainian army, Major General Dmitry Marchenko, is credited with having recounted numerous heroic deeds performed by ordinary Ukrainians. The account provided by Marchenko sheds light on the precarious circumstance in which the Russian army finds itself. The Ukrainian people blocked the Russian army. Marchenko said, "For many years, Russia has been making preparations for this. However, the Russian authorities made a grave error in judgment. They did not believe that regular citizens, in addition to the armed forces, would put up a fight. The Russian army was facing significant challenges, particularly in urban and rural areas. The people of Ukraine did everything in their power to thwart any attempt by the Russian army to advance into the region. Farmers in Ukraine abandoned their tractors and other agricultural vehicles on the roads leading into the tanks were unable to move forward as a result of this obstruction. Additionally, a fascinating discovery was made by the villagers of Ukraine on the primary roads that the tanks traveled. A significant quantity of gravel was dumped. Gravel, ash, and straw were poured on top of this layer. First, the ruts left in the gravel by Russian tanks as they crossed the straw were still. The advance of the Russian army was slowed down as a result of Russian tanks becoming bogged down on the road, even though the Russian tanks slowed down. This was not enough to win the battle. Together with members of the Ukrainian army, Ukrainian civilians began working to blow up the facility. A covert resistance group comprised of members drawn from the civilian population was formed by the Ukrainian armed forces. On the path that the Russian army was using to move through the area, this organization had placed mines. Damage was being done to the Russian convoy that had come into contact with these mines. The Ukrainian military instructed the resistance organization in the technique of mine laying. The mines were laid out in a specific order, and after the initial blast, the retreating Russian soldiers and tanks ran into this order of. Putin issued orders that led to the arrest of members of this covert resistance organization. The amount of torture that was meted out by Russian soldiers began to escalate. Those Ukrainian citizens who were kidnapped from the cities began to be subjected to torture as a form of punishment. The majority of Ukrainians were either mute or committed suicide. Instead of turning traitor, the Ukrainians chose to die. The routes that the Russian army used to transport its ammunition were cut off. There is a trick to every job. In order to be a good chess player, you need to execute the appropriate moves at the appropriate time and in the appropriate location. This might make things a lot less difficult when everything is in its place. A task that normally takes hours can be finished in a matter of seconds. This also holds true during times of. As a result of their operations in very strategic areas, the Ukrainian armed forces currently hold a significant military advantage. The Russian army was rendered completely helpless as a result of this operation during its invasion of Ukraine. The Russian army is currently encountering a significant logistical obstacle, mainly due to the fact that the Russian army lacks sufficient amounts of the necessary technical information for this. The locations of large military depots in Ukraine, as well as the routes that connected these depots, were unknown to the Russian troops stationed and there. As a result of the sudden operations carried out by the Ukrainian army, the connection routes between the military bases held by the Russian army had been significantly severed. The Russian military consistently struggled with transporting their ammunition supplies. Unfavorable shock and store for checkpoints were established by Ukrainian troops at strategic intersections of highways. These areas were inaccessible to Russian tanks in any direction. This also had a significant effect on the Russian army's ability to coordinate with one another. On some fronts, there was a significant number of tanks and other weapons, while on others, the Russian army was in a very precarious condition. The goal of the Ukrainian army was to accomplish this by gaining control of the intersection. In each and every region where the Russian army was short on ammunition, operations were carried out in order one after the other. One by one, Russian bases were overrun and taken because they were under-equipped with weapons and soldiers. The Ukrainian army was able to gain a significant advantage in this conflict by conducting these strategic operations. On the other hand, the Ukrainian military utilized drones to keep an eye on all of the military activities conducted by the Russian. As a result, Russia's attack plans were made public. However, the Russian military was never able to determine which region of the country Ukraine planned to operate in. Putin was constantly in for unpleasant revelations. The most interesting war in all of human history. Wars are regarded as the most significant crises in the world. Decisions made in times of crisis have the potential to completely alter everything. There are times when a single choice can affect the course of history. Unprecedented events transpired in the conflict that is taking place between Russia and Ukraine. This occurrence has the potential to alter the way the war is fought. This astonishing turn of events has garnered a significant amount of coverage in the Ukrainian press. Everything appears to have changed based on the information that we are receiving from those on the front. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine is by all measures the most fascinating war in the annals of human history. About the events that took place during this conflict, there will be hundreds of articles written. There are two aspects that make this conflict stand out from others. Unmanned aerial vehicles completely changed the course of this war to begin. This was the first battle in history to make use of modern. During this conflict, cutting-edge defense technologies such as radar systems and weapons powered by artificial intelligence were put to the test. However, there was a weapon that was more important than any other: drones. The Bar-Actor drones that are being used by the Ukrainian army have fundamentally altered the path that this conflict will take. The Ukrainian military was able to achieve a significant increase in its level of military superiority as a direct result of the production of these drones using the most cutting-edge technology. These drones were responsible for the destruction of thousands of Russian tanks. The drones made it impossible for the Russian army to defend themselves. Russia's plans did not work. Another aspect that distinguished this conflict from others was the significance it held for the development of world. Since the end of the Second World War, there had not been an open conflict of this nature between the Eastern and Western blocs. Russia initiated hostilities in order to thwart Ukraine's membership application with NATO. As a direct response to this conflict, members of NATO have provided significant financial assistance to the Ukrainian government. The use of NATO weapons against Russian weapons took. The maintenance of political equilibrium on a global scale became increasingly important. Nobody wants to admit that they were wrong. Accepting defeat shows a level of maturity far beyond most people's reach. Those individuals who refuse to concede defeat continue to put up a fight, or alternatively, they attempt to alter the guidelines and cheat. This is what Vladimir Putin, who was recently defeated by Ukraine in a historic battle, is. After facing stiff opposition from the Ukrainian army, Russia came to the conclusion that it could not win this war. Putin made the decision to use an unconventional strategy in order to change the current situation. However, Ukrainian soldiers were able to successfully thwart this plot. It was like a movie after Vladimir Putin came to the conclusion that the Russian army would not be sufficient to defeat Ukraine. He conceived of an innovative. He gave the order to seize the clothing of Ukrainian service members who had been captured by the Russian army. After donning the uniforms of their Ukrainian counterparts, Russian troops were dispatched to the conflict zone. The soldiers were initially dispatched to the Khark region, which was occupied by the Russians. They were planning to make a stealthy entry into territory controlled by the Ukrainian army at 12 in the. They would be dispatched to the Chernin Highlands, which is located to the north of Kiev and shares a border with Belarus. It was from this region that they planned to launch an assault on the Belarusian border. Belarus would likely conclude from this that Ukraine was waging war against it. As a direct consequence of this development, the army of Belarus would wage war against Ukraine. Putin's strategy was deceptively straightforward. The latest scheme from Put. In previous wars, plans not dissimilar to this one have been carried out. This kind of operation is known as a false flag operation. In most cases, states carry out such operations in an attempt to paint themselves in the role of a victim and win support on the international stage. On the other hand, the false flag operation is nothing more than a lie. Following Putin's briefing of the Russian commanders on this plan, approximately 100 Russian soldiers were sent into. These soldiers came from a variety of different battalions and were chosen for this mission. This operation was given to the least seasoned soldiers in the Russian army's ranks to handle as a result of the widespread belief that the Belarusian army would be responsible for these soldiers' deaths during the conflict. Putin continued to put his soldiers in danger by sending them to their deaths. Russia selected the most clueless soldiers for a total of 100 Russian soldiers recruited from 10 different units and outfitted in the military. Uniforms of Ukrainian prisoners made their way out of the prison. These service members were loaded into 5 military vehicles with a capacity of 20 passengers each. The soldiers entered Ukrainian territory in small groups before making the crossing. The Ukrainian soldiers didn't notice them until much. However, because the Russian soldiers were dressed in Ukrainian military uniforms, no one suspected them of being the intruders. However, the soldiers stationed in the observation tower of the Ukrainian army became suspicious. When they noticed an increase in the number of troops in the vicinity, they started keeping a close eye on the newcomers through their binoculars. These soldiers all appeared to be in a state of great. However, the Ukrainian army did not make any preparations to launch a new operation in this region. The scout soldier started acting more suspiciously toward them, and he kept watching them. Something extraordinary caught his eye as he appeared through the binoculars, and he immediately recognized it. The Ukrainian army did not have any trucks available, so the Russian soldiers were sent there with one. Once there, they took control of As soon as the Ukrainian soldiers became aware of the situation, they immediately went into a state of high alert. Howitzer belonging to the Ukrainian army launched an assault on the region where Russian soldiers dressed as Ukrainian soldiers were located. 70 of every 100 Russian soldiers were killed in the region. The Ukrainian army transported wounded service members to nearby hospitals. The most recent developments in the situation in the city of Bach. The Russian military forces are continuing their assaults in an effort to take the city during the clashes. The Ukrainian army is said to have taken the lives of a significant number of Chechen fighters as reported by the Ukrainian army. It is estimated that there are no more than 200 Chechen fighters currently engaged in combat. At the front lines of the conflict in the city of Bachman, it was reported that Mike Ka had suffered On the other hand, battles are still going on within the city between members of the Ukrainian army following the fabrication by Russia that we had taken control of the city. A statement was issued by the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian General Staff has made the announcement that they will be sending additional forces to the city of Bachman. The Ukrainian elite troops that had been dispatched to the region launched an assault on the Russian military. The elite Ukrainian soldiers surrounded the Russian soldier from behind, causing damage to a significant number of armored vehicles in the process.